Tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora, and welcome to another Manawanui live stream. My name is Simon, and today we are spending the time together preparing for the upcoming changes from Disability Support Services, or DSS, as we refer to them more commonly. What we're trying to do today is cover any of the questions you have that I am able to answer, but also we are planning to have guests from DSS on a live stream probably late March, right before the changes, and anything that I can't answer, what we'll do is we'll use that information, those questions, to help prepare for that session so that we can make sure that while they are here with us, it's as beneficial as it can be, and we can cover off as many of the common questions as you have. So if there is a question you have related to the upcoming changes, I encourage you now to pop it in the comments section, and we will go through them as best we can. While I wait for questions to come through, I just need to notify you all that this Thursday, the CEC phone line will be closing slightly earlier. So we'll be closing the phones at 3:30. That is just so that the whole CEC team can attend a meeting together, and we just need to have those phones close a little early. So please bear in mind that if you're calling on a Thursday, please get in touch before that cutoff time. So yeah, hopefully there's some questions coming through. Please don't be shy. We did talk about the changes already that are happening for February. So I mean, this, it's not relevant to people who already have IF, but if you're interested, so from this week onwards, all of the needs assessors would sending out letters to the people that they are about to do their first assessment with, and that letter is going to explain the process they're about to go through and give them all the information to prepare for their assessment. Then from next week onwards, people who have yet to have their first assessment will go through the new process, and at the end of it, they'll receive something called a My DSS funding plan. And that funding plan will have a lot more information in it around a person's disability, their circumstances, around their family and their life, and will have a really clear set of purposes for the funding. So it won't just have, with individualized funding, it won't just have a set dollar amount related to it. It will actually have some real clear purposes around what that funding is there to support, and it will help the IF host do a better job of supporting the disabled person or their agent to spend the funding in a way that's going to achieve those purposes most effectively. Margaret says, where do people funded by MOH stand? So it depends what you're talking about, Margaret. If you're meaning the people who are funded through their DHB, or what is now known as Te Whatu Ora, if they're funded under health of older people, if it's related to an age-related condition, if they are over 65, then nothing is changing. There are some people who also are funded through the DHB for what we call long-term chronic health conditions. That's where somebody has an actual health condition rather than a disability that requires them to need care outside of a hospital environment. Those people also aren't impacted. But Margaret, if you're talking about people, if you're looking at our portal, when you log into your portal and your funding says Ministry of Health, then that's actually what is considered DSS funding now, and is funded by MSD, and you are impacted by these changes. Karen is just reminding me that there were a few questions on the actual Facebook post. So let me just bring that up in front of me. Thank you very much, Karen, for pointing that out. Let's go through them. First one, excuse me if I don't pronounce this correctly, but Ainain, A-I-N-A-I-N, has the question, will DSS waive off all the restrictions and put back to how it was before April 2024? The answer is yes, sort of. In actuality, we're thinking it will be even more flexible than what people were used to prior to the changes in 2024. Because before then, there was still the for purchasing criteria. So it was incredibly flexible and people were very good at applying the purchasing guidelines to the situation, but you still had to meet those 4 criteria. As we understand it now from what is on the website, in April, when the purchasing guidelines are removed, the only criteria around justifying how you spend your IF is that it must relate to a barrier that your disability creates, and the purchase or the way you spend your funding removes or lessens that barrier for you. I mean, the example being if your disability creates a physical limitation on how you get around your town or city, and you want to spend your funding to enable you to be more mobile or have more control and independence over the way you navigate around town, then that is all we need to know, and we can support that purchase. So yeah, it's going to be quite a different relationship and process with us as your IF host, because we're not going to need you to provide justification against 4 different criteria. What we need to make sure that you can provide to us is just a real clear justification that this purchase or the way you are spending your funding removes or addresses a barrier that your disability creates in some part of your life and how you live your life or engage with the things in your community. Margaret says, I have funding for a long-term condition. Yeah, so the thing is a disability is a long-term condition, right? You have it for life. But it's the easiest way to clarify is, who was the organization that allocated you the funding? Was it a NASC as we know it, or was it somebody from your local DHB region, or what we call Te Whatu Ora? And if it is from DHB, then you are not impacted by these changes. The easiest way, Margaret, to get certainty is just to ask us via email or phone, and we will be able to tell you that. It's just I can't pull up your funding right now while I'm talking to you to give you that certainty around that answer. Emma, so you said you're from Lifelinks, and you said your question is, if you have funding and it is due for renewal in a couple of months, what can you expect to happen? So Emma, your funding period renews during the renewal, also the reassessment freeze. So what's going to happen for you is that in April, your funding may be readjusted like everybody else's. What's going to happen is that when your funding period renews, that funding is just going to roll over. Lifelinks are not going to contact you to do a reassessment by default. They are just going to roll your funding over. Now, if there is some exceptional change to your circumstances, then there is still the possibility of a assessment, but they are just going to try and limit those as much as possible until after October this year. And that is so that all of the NASCs can clear their backlog of first-time assessments that they have waiting to do. Paula says, what happens if your funding is for respite and not necessarily on the person with disabilities? Well, so respite funding is allocated to the disabled person, but the purpose of respite is to cover the costs of the substitute support while the main carers get a break. What we are anticipating after the changes in April is that there will be a much more flexible interpretation of how respite is achieved. A good example that was previously possible but isn't currently is, say, the disabled person is not comfortable staying in a respite facility or in another household with family or friends. And so if the main carers, being mum and dad, want need to have their break from the caring responsibilities, mum and dad need to be able to stay somewhere else, and the carers would come into the home. And so what would happen is people would pay for a night in a motel and have carers or family come in to do the care for that evening. You can't currently use your funding to pay for that motel, but we would see that probably would return. Just looking through, a whole bunch of questions came through. Apologies. AJ says, will there still be things like personal cares, etc., or will it come under one bracket? We're not sure. I believe there will still be the separate funding buckets of personal care, household management, and respite. Yeah, I don't see that changing, but that's a great question. We will have that confirmed when we bring the DSS guests on later in the year. Karen makes a very good comment. The flexibility will be plan-based, so make plans. It is very good for you all with current funding is to revisit the any documentation that was created the last time you had an assessment or a conversation with your needs assessor. And also, if you are with us, look into the portal and go to your profile page to check if there is your ISP or your individual support plan. Review that stuff, because that is the basis of a plan already. And if that information is missing, or if it's very old and outdated, then I would strongly recommend that you sit down. If you're the disabled person, sit down with your family, or vice versa. Sit down together and really talk about what is it that is important in the short term, and then also some medium to long term goals, and then also really understand from a day-to-day perspective, what is it that you need to ensure your disabled person has a fulfilling and supported life, right? If you can articulate that stuff, put it into a document, then that's going to make our jobs infinitely more easy when it comes to discussing purchases with you once the guidelines are removed. Margaret, you said that your NASC assessment was via Taikura. They are now called Kai Karanga, but that means you are DSS funded, so you are impacted by these changes. So I can give you that certainty. Rebecca says, will we be able to use funding remaining due to rollover in July? Will there be time to use it under the new rules? I'm not quite sure what you mean, sorry, if you want to just try and reword your question. But just flat out in general, individualized funding is usually for a 12-month period, and no funding ever is rolled over. It's used for a set period, and then a new funding package is allocated for the next period of time. Emma says, so if you're rolling over in the freeze period, will this be for both IF and personal care, or are we saying it may change for personal care immediately? So what I'm saying is that whether you've got IF for your personal care, or you've got IF for respite, or you have both, if, for example, your funding renews in August, once you get to your renewal date in August, whatever funding you were allocated for that previous funding year will just come straight over. Like, they are just going to give you the exact same amount of funding that you had previously, and you won't have an opportunity to get an assessment done unless there is a really exceptional change to your circumstances. But like I said, in April, everybody's funding will be readjusted. We're not quite sure if you actually have a change to your funding allocation, but they are reviewing everybody's funding and spending, and they will be reviewing whether they will make a readjustment to your funding balance. So from April, you most likely will see a new funding balance. Some people, it will stay the same. We don't know what that will look like until we get that information from DSS in April. Amanda has a good question. What happens if you get assessed and made plans for funding for a specific purpose, but you end up using it for something else? Is that permitted? That will probably be possible with discussion with your needs assessor. The way we understand the funding plans to be written is that the purposes are somewhat generic, right? They're not so explicit that it gets right down to the actual individual activity, but more about purposes. I mean, these are examples, but I'm assuming they will be something like increasing physical well-being or increasing connection to social networks. And so under those purposes, there are a huge possibility of how you achieve that purpose. So you shouldn't need to shift your purposes within a funding plan period, but I would assume there is the flexibility to talk to your NASC, agree on a shift of purpose, and then that would be communicated to your host as well. Rebecca says, we're currently unable to purchase Lego and technologies, etc. Will we be able to? I can't say yes or no. What I will say is that you will need to be able to justify that purchasing Lego addresses a barrier related to your disability. An example that may be appropriate is if you have a disabled family member with autism. The barrier that autism creates is that it is a challenge for sensory regulation, and that might create social isolation, or it means that you are unable to go to many community outings or social activities because sensory dysregulation creates a barrier. If the Lego then reduces that barrier to social activities, then I would say that's probably an acceptable justification for that purchase, if that makes sense. This is all hypothetical, and we're waiting on a lot of detail from DSS around this sort of stuff, but this is my best guess at predicting what things will be like for you after the changes are made. Just looking through the comments to make sure I haven't missed anything. Let's go back to the Facebook post. Okay, so that's all the comments from the Facebook post earlier today. So yeah, if you have any questions, still got a few moments before we close down at 5. While I wait, just a reminder, so if you missed it at the beginning, our phone lines will be closing at 3:30 on Thursday this week. It's just so that we can have an all-team meeting with the CEC team. Yeah, we'll just have to close those phones early, so please keep that in mind, that if you need to call us on the Thursday, you'll need to get in slightly early. And if you, Terry says, where did you say we can find who funds us? The best place to look is on your statement. Now, we do need to, put our hand up for some accountability. Our funding labels in the portal are a little historic. We are actually going through the process of getting that updated. So if you are funded through DSS, Disability Support Services, it's now managed by MSD, but your statement and your funding lines will still show Ministry of Health. But if you are funded through Te Whatu Ora, or previously what you'd know as your DHB, you would see your specific regional DHB, like Waitemata DHB, as your funder or your funding. So yeah, if you see Ministry of Health as your funding records in the portal, that means you are impacted by the DSS changes. Leonie, I'll go back to Gigi. Will there be blanket rules, or will it depend on the situation / NASC assessment what's approved? Yeah, so it looks like there will be very little blanket rules when it comes to assessing purchases. So what I mean is that, I said earlier, the justification is around how your disability creates barriers to your life, and the purchasers needs to alleviate that barrier in some way or completely. So there's no guidelines, no criteria. That is the only justification we need. The only sort of blanket rules are around approvals. So things like overseas travel needs approval from your host at all times. And they have indicated that items over a set value limit will need pre-approval regardless, but we don't know what that dollar number is yet. Leonie says, do you know if we will be able to use funding to pay for a carer when we travel? We believe so. There hasn't been any mention on the DSS website about prohibiting paying for carers' travel costs. So if you need to travel around the country to visit family, to do that for work, but you need a carer to travel with you, then it looks like, I'm making sure I'm covering myself, it looks like you will be able to use your funding to cover carer costs. So that would be things like their flights and accommodation. Whereas currently, all you could pay for now would be the hours that they actually provide support for you while you're traveling. Emma says, if the focus is on new applications and you're rolling over in the freeze period, will we only know the change by looking in the portal, and if a change has been made, who do we contact? So in April, at the same time, for everybody with an active funding allocation, the I believe it's coming from DSS, it won't come from NASCs. DSS, they will give us a spreadsheet, I'm assuming, of everybody that we have funding that we host, and it will say what their current funding package is, and it will have an adjusted value. Some people, they won't have their funding adjusted at all. Some people will have their funding adjusted down. And what we will do is we will update that in the portal. I'm assuming this is a draft plan, because we still don't know exactly what's going to happen. But the draft plan is we will get notified of everybody's new funding balances. We will update it in the portal, and then we will notify people that their funding balance is different. And I don't know if there is going to be much of a process to question or qualify that adjustment. I mean, because the adjustment is coming centrally from DSS, that is where I would assume you'd need to go, and not to your NASC. But that is information we will get from DSS when they join us on the live stream later on. Kate says, is there any improvement on the travel area guidelines, e.g. distance versus region? From the information that is available on their website, it seems like any domestic travel is going to be possible. You know, but if it's going to be too costly, it may trigger that pre-approval process with the host. The only time pre-approval is mandatory is if it is overseas travel. But if you're traveling in between cities and it is a domestic flight, I could imagine that those costs would fall under that cost limit, and you'd be able to do that without seeking pre-approval. AJ says, is there anyone we can email in regards to specific circumstances and guidance around funding assessments and the freeze? Yes, so the guidance is still the same. If there has been material changes to your circumstances between your last assessment and now, the best place to go is your needs assessor at your NASC. You need to make it very clear that things have changed for you in your life, and explain to them what those are and why it might mean that your funding needs to reflect that change, and they will then make the decision if it meets the criteria for a reassessment, or they will just roll over your funding package that you had last time. Anna says, when you say April, is there a specific date? No. How do I say this? Originally, their communication stated 1 April, but they've removed that from the website, and it seems like it will just be whenever they are confident they have worked out all of the detail and they've made sure that all of the NASCs, all of the IF hosts are informed and understand what's happening, and then we will get the actual dates. You know, I'll just relate it to the changes that happened in February. You know, they said that from the 1st of February, people would go through the new assessment process. Well, it's not actually, nobody was going through the new assessment process until next week. So yeah, we don't actually know the official day in April when it will happen. But by the time we have the team from DSS on the live stream, I would hope that we can get that from them. Yeah, Emma says, great question. Normally if we roll over in April, we get contacted in March now, and it sounds like we won't know until the actual rollover due date. So you will know ahead of time when your funding will change, but it sounds like you won't know what your funding balance will be until that date, and until we have updated in our systems if you are with us. So these have all been fabulous questions. The ones I have been able to answer, I hope that has been helpful. The ones where we're not quite sure, or there's still some uncertainty, all of this is great because I will take these questions to the contacts I have at DSS, and we'll work on the live stream for probably March. It will probably be March. And we'll make sure that we cover off all these questions that you've had. So I hope you've all found this valuable. Please continue to ask questions. Please send them through to us if you don't know where else to go, because we will collect all of that information and make sure that we can get DSS to provide the answers for you. So yeah, I hope you have a lovely evening, and I will see you same time next week. Ka kite. And we're clear.